She's written one called The Djinn Connection. Rosemary has worked full-time in the paranormal and metaphysical field since 1983. She's a consulting editor of Fate magazine, publishing also her own newsletter. And here she is back on Coast to Coast. Rosemary, how are you?
Hi, George. Busy as ever. It sure is great to be back on the show.
Yeah, you sure are. You're everywhere. You were also a guest of mine on Beyond Belief. You did a great job. People are still sending me emails about your performance on that program.
I can't wait to see it.
I know. It's coming up. It'll be on a Friday. And, of course, if you're looking at it, you can also record it and keep it and look at it forever, Rosemary. Anyways, this is a fascinating subject. I talked a week or so ago about the Djinn, but they just seem to be cropping up more and more. Give me your explanation on just what the Djinn might be.
They are a race of supernatural beings who are attached to the earth. They were here on the earth before us, and in fact, they had dominion over the earth, which they lost to us. They live in a parallel dimension. In earlier times, people believe they lived underground or they just retreated to very remote areas. But in modern terms, it really makes sense as a parallel dimension. They have access to our world, and there are those among them who aren't very friendly toward us. They're not all bad, they're not all good, just like human beings, but some of them have a lot of hostility towards humans. I believe, based on my research of years and years tracking these entities throughout the paranormal realm, that they account for a lot of our negative experiences, hauntings, possession, entity encounters, and also abductions, including the ET abduction phenomenon.
All right, we're going to get into all this. Now, the Middle Eastern folklore of genies popping out of the bottle and things like that, are they tied into the Djinn?
Absolutely, that's exactly what we're talking about. The word genie came from the term Djinn, which means the hidden ones. They've always been kind of hidden from people. They don't want us to know what they're doing. But when old Arabian folk tales, which are collected into a body of works called the Arabian Nights, when those were translated for the Western audiences into French and English, some of the French translations translated Djinn as genie. And that's actually kind of a corruption of the term genius, which is a Roman spirit of place. So Djinn is really the correct name for these entities, but they became embedded in our popular culture as the genie in the bottle.
Where did they come from, Rosemary? How'd they develop?
There are different stories about their origins. One very ancient Arabian legend says that they came from the winds. They were literally primordial wind spirits, and they were often responsible for ill winds that blew, bringing in disease and bad luck. In the Quran, they're explained as pre-existing humans created from a substance called smokeless fire. So the Djinn have really no known form, no physical form that we can identify with. But they have the ability to shapeshift. They can shapeshift into human forms. They can shapeshift into animal forms. They especially like to shapeshift into weird forms that are sometimes half animal, half human, or combinations of creatures.
Could they be fallen angels, Rosemary?
There are a lot of parallels between the bad Djinn and fallen angels. For example, the Quran tells the story that the Djinn lost their place in this world and in paradise because they refused to bow to humans when God created humans. At the beginning, there were angels and Djinn. Then along came humans, and God issued the instructions to the angels to bow to the humans, his new creations. The angels did. The Djinn, who had free will, said no, because these new entities are inferior to us. And so they were pushed out in consequence. And the angry ones then become the evil Djinn who follow a leader named Iblis, whose name means he who is despaired. And the Djinn all have to leave, and the bad ones then torment people, and they are granted a reprieve until Judgment Day to prove their case that human beings are unworthy. So the Djinn are like humans, the good, the bad, and the ugly. They have different motivations, different intentions. They have their own factions of terrorists, just like humans do. And we interact with those angry ones. We can also interact with more benevolent ones, but I do believe that most of our interactions with them are negative because these are the ones who are making the effort to act out against human beings.
How do we know we're not being tricked? If we interact with the benevolent ones, how do we know they're really not the evil ones?
Well, sometimes that proves to be the case, and we see this a lot in entity contact experiences where an entity starts out as Mr. Nice Guy, even assumes a human-like personality, and then once they have an attachment to a person, they turn and they become more manipulative, controlling, negative. They can really wreak havoc with a person. Throughout the literature on Djinn, going back centuries and centuries, when they are described, they are most often described as vengeful by nature and very deceitful, that they're untrustworthy. And so even if we think we're dealing with them in a positive way, they might be able to turn the tables on us at any time.
Rosemary, the fact that folklore and legend talks about the Djinn so often, what does that tell you about the real possibilities that these entities might be real?
They are real. I've had encounters with a variety of entities over the course of my research, some of them positive, some of them ambivalent, and some of them quite hostile. And I believe that the Djinn, comprise quite a hidden portion of our entity contact experiences. They masquerade as other entities that we know by other names. We might think we're dealing with a demon when we're really dealing with Djinn. There's no way to scientifically prove these entities, but we have hundreds and hundreds of years of persuasive anecdotal experience where people describe the same sorts of experiences over and over again around the planet throughout time, the same core experiences with certain behaviors, certain characteristics. That says to me that we clearly have had interactions with otherworldly beings from the time we first came on this planet.
You know, when people get possessed, could it be, the evil Djinn that might be doing that, or is that a demon of some type?
They do have the capability of possessing people and animals as well. Many times, I think we're dealing with Djinn in possession cases when we think we're dealing with demons. I've often been asked, well, how do you know the difference? Because if the Djinn can act in demonic ways, how do we know whether or not we're dealing with demons or with Djinn? And oftentimes, it is hard for experts, investigators, people who do exorcisms and releasements. It is hard to know the difference. Many times the Djinn are very difficult to cast out, and they often have very selfish motives for attaching to people. They want something for themselves. It's not a spiritual battle for the soul, but more a takeover for their own purposes. They will, however, absorb and use soul energy.
What causes them to show up in someone's life? Do they get conjured up by the individual? How do they show up?
Sometimes they do come because people have either deliberately or even unwittingly called them in by experimenting with magical practices or sometimes even spirit communication. They're often attracted to people who make the wrong decisions. They want power. They want control. They want wealth. They want to manipulate people. And these people then become easy manipulation targets for the Djinn because many of them like to sow the seeds of chaos. They can also be attracted to people who have weakened defenses. They're in poor health. They're in emotional trauma. And these sorts of emotions seem to be a source of food for a lot of opportunistic entities. I think also they watch us. They might track individuals or families for generations and monitor them for how they might be useful to them.
Do they take physical form, Rosemary?
They can. They can appear as real people. They can acquire forms that are solid, that can wrestle with people and grab people. They can be very beautiful. They can be very monstrous. It depends on what effect they want to have on the people they've targeted.
Now, when they interact with human beings and they come through these various sources, I assume they can also sneak through a Ouija board, can't they?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, some of the negative entities that show up frequently on Ouija boards are quite likely Djinn. I've believed that the entity known as Zozo, who is a negative entity particularly associated with the Ouija boards, Zozo and various other Z names it goes by, that Zozo is a Djinn.
Where are they in terms of in the cosmos? I mean, are they in a different dimension? Are they in the bowels of the planet? Where the heck are these things?
In lore, they live underground. They like remote areas, caves, tunnels, wastelands. I've encountered them in remote areas in America, especially in areas where there have been a lot of mining operations. But from a modern perspective, they exist in a parallel dimension. We have a number of dimensions that are in our universe, which really is a multiverse. These are all connected to Earth. So they have a tie to the physical planet of the Earth, but being in another dimension, they are at a different vibrational rate in their natural state, and so we don't see them or encounter them most of the time. They're sort of around a corner, so to speak, but they are capable of coming into our world when people call them in, or they find thin spots, these portal areas that are all over the planet where the boundaries between dimensions are very permeable.
If you were to see one of these things walking down the street, what would it look like? What would it be wearing?
Nobody really knows what the true form of the Djinn is. In ancient lore, they favor forms like snakes, reptilian forms, animal forms, black dogs. But one could walk down the street and we might not even know it. According to ancient lore, however, that even when they take beautiful human forms, there's something about them that gives them away if you know what to look for. I think that there are these beings moving around on the planet. They don't seem to have the capability to stay for long periods of time, but they do come and mingle with us. And there are even hybrids. I do believe that we have a variety of hybrids that have come onto the planet, and it's very difficult to tell them from us.
These forms that they take, different animals, things. I saw, for example, remember the movie The Omen?
Yes.
Was it a Rottweiler? What was it? That kind of dog? It was a Doberman or a Rottweiler?
It was a Rottweiler.
Yeah. Would a Djinn do something like that?
Yes. They will take whatever form suits their purpose. They're famous, for example, as black dogs, and black spectral dogs have been in folklore all over the planet.
Sure have. With red eyes, too, right?
Oftentimes with red eyes. I believe they account for a lot of our mysterious creature encounters, these creatures that should not be. The monster birds, the animals that seem to be composed of 4 or 5 different species, or monstrous sorts of animals. People often encounter them when they're out in remote areas, and they have a surprise when they're camping or walking down a trail. These might be forms of Djinn.
What do they want, Rosemary? What are they after?
They have a variety of motives, just like human beings have a variety of motives. Some of them are on a campaign of terror against us, and literally they want their homeland back. They want the planet back. They want to have dominion over it again. Others are interested in tormenting us for their own food source. They get energy off of us for their own amusement or entertainment. Some of them actually become infatuated with us and they want to attach to people and follow them around.